ways that the superpowers didn't as much is, what are you trying to deter with nuclear weapons? Right? So why are you attracting nuclear weapons, and what are you using them for in your larger strategic policy? So some states need nuclear weapons just to deter nuclear use against them, right? States like China, for example, right, with huge geography, 3 million men under arms, defense in depth strategy, aren't really facing conventional threats on land the way that the U.S. and Soviet Union were facing off in Western Europe. So China and India both primarily have nuclear weapons to deter nuclear use against them. If you're worried about a nuclear-armed adversary, you don't want your adversary to have nuclear weapons, and you do not have the ability to retaliate. But you're really using nuclear weapons to deter nuclear use against you. You can then rely on what we call an assured retaliation strategy, right? You just need to be able to survive what might be a first strike against you and retaliate with nuclear weapons against your adversary's population centers. This is your classic deterrence by punishment strategy. Nuclear weapons don't need to be on high alert. Retaliation doesn't need to be immediate. It just needs to be certain. And you don't need tactical nuclear weapons. You're not using nuclear weapons on conventional forces that might be attacking you. So this allows for much more centralized best management if that's your aim. If your aim is to deter conventional aggression, right, this was the U.S. and NATO during the Cold War. We had conventional inferiority in Europe. In order to offset the conventional capability of the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union, the United States needed nuclear weapons, the threat of tactical nuclear weapons, to offset that differential. And we need to threaten to use nuclear weapons first. If Warsaw Pact nuclear conventional forces came crashing into Western Europe, the United States very explicitly threatened to use tactical nuclear weapons against advancing Warsaw Pact forces. Right? Unlike in the assured retaliation case, you can say, look, I have a no-first-use policy. I won't use nuclear weapons unless you use them against me. Primarily strategic weapons. Compared to, here you have a very forward, aggressive, tactical nuclear weapons capability, where you have to threaten to use nuclear weapons first, right? Because you're trying to deter conventional attacks. And it kind of looks like a denial and punishment mission at the same time. Right? And now regional powers are facing the same question. Now, can anyone guess where India falls? Assured retaliation. They're not trying. They have conventional superiority against Pakistan. Not really worried about China invading India, marching all the way to Delhi. Primarily trying to deter nuclear use against its own citizens. Where does Pakistan fall? What is Pakistan worried about? So Pakistan is, primarily worried about Indian conventional superiority. And having been at the receiving end of the dismemberment from India in 1971, which I'll talk about, Pakistan has operationalized a posture that is very aggressive, very oriented towards battlefield nuclear weapons against Indian conventional forces that might cross the international border. And so they have a first use, I call it asymmetric escalation doctrine. They threaten to escalate a conventional conflict with nuclear very quickly because earlier than India would, before any other nuclear weapons are used, because they're worried about Indian conventional superiority against them. Pakistan actually started its nuclear program before India tested the so-called CNE in 1974. Because on the heels of the 1970s, I was talking about this. So India's security environment historically, right? So it has the 1962 war with China, in which its conventional performance shocked even the Indian army and the Indian leadership. The Chinese performed so much better than the Indians in the 1962 war, and India decisively lost the 1962 war. 2 years later, China tested its nuclear weapons. Right? So, Indian military program gets its motivation initially from its experiences in 62 and 64 with China. And to avoid nuclear coercion, in the future against China, India hedges under the Nehru years and then the subsequent leadership under Indira Gandhi. It does also have these persistent wars with Pakistan, but it has conventional superiority, and there really never any talk about needing nuclear weapons for the Pakistanis. So India had a civilian nuclear program, right? Got a CANDU reactor in Canada. Some of the heavy water was supplied by the United States. 54, reprocessing facility in 64. And then in 1974, Indira Gandhi authorizes what's known, at the time under the Atoms for Peace program, there was a category known as a peaceful nuclear explosion, which was, I mean, there were legitimate uses, it was believed at the time, for nuclear, like you need to clear large swaths of land for dams, for example, right? And India had some potential uses for this, but didn't really fool it. I mean, a peaceful nuclear explosion is still a nuclear explosion. It wasn't, however, a warhead, right? I mean, this thing was a rickety, I think it was 8 meters in diameter device. I mean, it was hulking, unstable, rickety, fission device that they tested in 1970. It wasn't suitable for a military program, right? It wasn't miniaturized. It didn't have, it wasn't even suitable for delivery by aircraft. You have to throw it out the back of a cargo plane, right? I mean, it still gave them certainly the physics of being able to, sustain a fission. To sustain fission and have, like, spherical compression. All of that was, it was a plutonium device, so it wasn't trivial, but it wasn't a nuclear weapon in the sense that that we think of. So a lot of work was still yet to be done after 1974, but it demonstrated that Indian scientists had the ability to at least design rudimentary nuclear weapons. And there are several explanations for why it tested in 1974. The general security environment I talked about, China, persistent wars with Pakistan. They just won the 1971 war with Pakistan, which split Pakistan in two. I'll talk about that. That was the real motivation for the Pakistani program. But the real explanation is a combination of domestic politics and the power of the scientists. So Indira Gandhi was facing a potential series of losses in state government. She wanted a big win. There were several very prominent Indian physicists and engineers who promised a big boost in her electoral fortunes if she tested a nuclear weapon, and they really wanted to test a nuclear weapon because they've been working on it. Scientists like to test things to work on, and they had been doing this persistently for several years, and she then found her opportunity in 1974 when, right before a series of state elections, she authorized the test. Empirically, the test didn't actually help her that much electorally, but there was a belief that it might, and so that was some of the motivations for the test. So from 1974 until about 1989, for about 15 years, India's nuclear program went into effective dormancy. There was no high-level authorization from Indira Gandhi or her son, who later became prime minister after her assassination in 1984, for the militarization of the program. So India scientists worked on some of the theoretical work for miniaturization.